I want to share with you some of my learnings from the last 8 years building up corporate programs here in Berlin, not only for Deutsche Telekom, but recently for innogy. So an energy company, you just heard a lot about energy, and so I also think that's a very exciting space at the moment. And so one thing I recognized over these years, that many of the established firms starting something, doing innovative in an ecosystem, that they are coming with their transactional thinking, I call it. So, but on the opposite, the ecosystem has this ecosystem mindset, and this is more network oriented, and this will be the talk about. Let's look a little bit back on the energy industry, and you see a chart that is not looking very good, and it's getting even worse when you look at the comparison of the industry in Germany and the development in the stock market price. And so I think it's not a lot of fun to be in the industry. And when you look then on the personal level, so the people who decide or had to decide a couple years ago where they're heading with strategy, it's really look at this kind of a bias of a manager. And I really like the quote of Johannes Theissen, a CEO of E.ON, he made last year in January. Just a few years ago, E.ON was for a couple of weeks the most valuable company in Germany. Some of us, maybe also myself, did believe that the reason for this lay in the excellent management of the company. But this was obviously not the case. So what we can learn from this is that really you're having a bias as long as you're successful, and it's pretty hard to make decisions out of this comfort zone and bringing your organization into a totally new direction because you feel this is risk, because everything is running very smoothly and well. And this topic, more and more managers are confronted with that and asking themselves. For example, also Dieter Zetsche recently said, the biggest mistakes are made in the time of success. Yeah, and we see so many industries currently that are running smoothly and well, and they're really confronted with that kind of decision making now, yeah, and not when everything is going down the road. And so then from the individual level to an organizational level, we see that our large firms are really very good in optimizing the supply side. So having huge plants and producing cars, producing energy, and then also optimizing the process side to stay competitive. And that led to kind of a socialization of the organization. And I really like the quote of Peter Therium of RWE and now innogy, that he ran a company that followed the rule of 5-5-50. So what did he mean with that? Plan 5 years, build 5 years, and then run the business 50 years, so a plan. Yeah, and when you think about the organization that is running after this kind of rules, so it's anything else but agile. And so another principle that's also important and you have to take into consideration is the principle of transaction cost. Yeah, so this older guy, a Nobel Prize laureate from the beginning of the 2000s, he wrote in his article, The Nature of the Firm in 1987, that the reason for companies are the reduction of the transaction costs within the organization. And so everything that has to do with searching, negotiating, monitoring, governing the exchanges between people. Yeah, and therefore there are firms, because otherwise it could be done by individuals. And you optimize it over and over again, and the better you get on this optimization side, the worse you get on the innovation side, because innovation is not effective. It's not transaction cost effective. And that's why I'm not looking for that kind of stuff. And now, as you heard yesterday and today, a lot of exponential technology and also solar and many, many more are now entering the market, and they are going to change your industry. And so what you have to do now as an established firm, pretty good in optimization and developing your business further, you have to start thinking about exploring new stuff. Yeah, and I think here the problem starts, because you're not used to that, you don't have the people, you don't have the culture in your organization to do that. And taking this kind of a knowledge funnel from Roger Martin, you start with in a stage of mysticism. So for example, you see there's kind of a technology coming up like blockchain, and you start thinking, okay, what we can do with that? Yeah, maybe this, maybe that. And if you have your first hypotheses, then you move from mysticism to heuristics, because you say, okay, let's build a decentralized energy system using blockchain to do the peer-to-peer transactions from a solar rooftop to the battery and to the consumer. So that could be an idea. Then you have a hypothesis, you build a prototype, and then you move on, if you see that seems to work, to the stage of algorithm, where you have really repeating patterns, and then you can start thinking about scaling things up, and then the actual firm will pop in and say, hey, now we have something we can do, scale the business up. But actually, you're very good at exploitation, right? But maybe not so good at exploration. So looking for new technologies, ideas, building ventures projects, etc. And doing a little deep dive, why is that? Yeah, so looking at the exploitation and exploration and the principles that lying behind that. First, in exploitation, you have the principle of quid pro quo. That means that you want to buy something, a product or a service, you pay a definite amount of money to the seller, and you get this product back. So this is a one-on-one relationship with very formalized rules. When you now look into exploration, it's running totally differently. So serendipity plays a big role. Yeah, and therefore the rules of the network are applied. And for example, the principle of reciprocity. That means you're giving something into the network, yeah, but you're not getting directly back something from the network, but from other peers in the network, but you don't know what, you don't know when, yeah, and you don't know from whom. And this is only working because you have a lot of trust and reputation inside the network. And what you can see, this is working totally differently. You can identify new forms in the exploration, but things that you're not able to anticipate before. And taking one other observation here, and you have this only one-on-one relationship, yeah, in the exploitation. So you order something or you hire someone for your firm working, and he's doing what you want to get from him. But in a network, you have so many peers, and every peer is in transaction with each other, that you have exponential ways of or variants of transactions in comparison to the exploitation organization, where you have only one way of transaction. And here with exploitation, serendipity is, so to say, the enemy. But on the other hand side, in exploration, serendipity is your friend, because you want to figure out something new. And while you do the exploration, now ecosystem pops in, right? And we have so many ecosystems now around the world, and just the new Global Startup Ecosystem report was published a couple of weeks ago. And when we look at how ecosystems are defined, then they're defined by the performance, or the probability of that a startup will be successful on a global scale out of the ecosystem. Number two, the funding, so that there is enough venture capital and also capable and VC firms that are really able to help the startup to grow. Then the market reach. Yeah, so is the startup able to build their business out of the ecosystem on a global scale? The talent that they can attract within the ecosystem, and also bring the people from all over the world to the ecosystem to work, for example, within a startup, and the startup experience itself. So do you have founders and people that are already experienced working within a startup, yeah, or haven't even founded a startup? And so you're looking for that kind of ecosystems, and we have, for example, the number 7 ecosystem in the world here in Berlin, and this is the reason why many of the established firms now open up this kind of innovation hub activities here in Berlin. Yeah, but looking at a company, for example, Innogy, they open up their innovation hub not only here in Berlin, they have a subsidiary in Silicon Valley, Tel Aviv, and London, because the ecosystems are so differently. The startups that are founded there and the innovators that are working there are working in different fields. And so we are there where every one of us gets their people. And so now what you can do in the ecosystem. And what's really important is that you have several activities, and let's start with the low-hanging fruits. With a hackathon and meetups, yeah, and especially with a hackathon, you can really understand what the difference between a transactional thinking and an ecosystem thinking means. So whom of you have already hosted or joined a hackathon? So maybe 30%, around something like that. And when you remember maybe hosting a hackathon and thinking about, okay, why should I do that? Yeah, what do I get out of a hackathon? And this is already transactional thinking, yeah, because maybe you want to get a problem solved, yeah, that is very well defined, and then you want to bring in talented people and solve the problem for you. Yeah, and it's so defined that you're thinking in a transactional mode. So I give something, yeah, I organize the hackathon, and what I do get back is the solution, yeah, that I am looking for. But when you look in the genuine idea of a hackathon, then you will recognize, okay, I'm opening up, I bring some technologies, I'm opening up data or APIs and try to attract the most creative hackers out of the ecosystem to work with that kind of technology. And I don't say what the outcome might be, because they want to play around with the technology, yeah, and not solving a problem for you. And then also, if there is a solution for some kind of problem, then you don't own the IP. Yeah, and this is from a corporate perspective, this is somehow ridiculous. Yeah, you pay for something, you organize something, people work for you on a topic, and you don't own the IP. Yeah, this is something a corporate normally doesn't do. And so, but on a hackathon, the whole IP stays with the people. Yeah, and they're just creating something totally new, and maybe it's just fun, but there's a serendipity that you maybe find some people that will work for you in the future, or see your company is working on something that is more interesting than I expected it. Yeah, and also what can the outcomes could be that you are working with people on their solutions, and you find out what you can build on the idea that they have developed in a hackathon. So the next thing is a meetup. Yeah, this is also kind of, when you compare it, if you would do it in a transactional way, you would say, okay, let's bring in some very bright-minded thought leaders and people, and let's work together and talk about some specific problems. And let's try to figure out if we can solve these problems. In a meetup, you inspire the ecosystem to come and take part in this meetup to talk about some topics. Yeah, and for example, what we did here in Berlin, together with the Deutsche Energieagentur, so also a not very exponential organization here in Germany, we convinced the managing director of the DENA to host a meetup by himself. Yeah, and so he did all the work with the meetup platform and convincing the ecosystem to join the meetup, because people are going to present very good stuff at the meetup. And guess what? What happened? So now over 1,500 people out of the ecosystem joined the meetup group on the future of energy topic, and every meetup is sold out. And what we get, for example, from Innogy from that is we get in touch with people that now work for us. Yeah, we didn't expect this. We don't ask for that. We get in touch with startups we are currently working with. We don't expect that. Yeah, and also a conference format that was just run a couple of weeks ago came out of this group. Yeah, and you say, this is something you're not able to expect. Yeah, if you plan that, invest and get something back. The ecosystem thinking is really get the people together and let's build something. And the ecosystem is working like that. So now let's talk about business, because the other topics were more about, okay, let's do something nice, engage with the ecosystem. So first thing is venture capital, company building, and acceleration. So the accelerator, this is something you all have heard of, and maybe also some of your companies you're working for have built accelerator programs, but you're building very early stage companies in this kind of accelerators, and maybe you own 5% of the equity. So does this move any needle for you in an organization? Probably not. Yeah, because maybe you have out of 100 companies, for example, like Axel Springer Plug and Play, having in their portfolio, and maybe just a few will be a number 26, yeah, and making maybe a return in the future for the portfolio of the company builder. But what is even more important, you collect the young entrepreneurs, helping them to build new startups, and you get in touch with them. You're building relationship, you're connecting with them, and also the people that are coming to join the accelerator, for example, as mentors, also the investors that might invest into the startups, you're getting in touch with them, this kind of a platform. Yeah, and the real future business will come out of that relationships. And maybe there will be also some startups that connect with your business and help the business to do better business. Yeah, and this will even have a more bigger impact than only just the investment itself. Then you could think, okay, if the acceleration doesn't bring that much to the bottom line, let's do company building. Yeah, company building like Rocket Internet, it seems to work, and let's do that, and we have at least 90% of the shares. But as we see in the last, let's say, 12 to 24 months, this model is also not working quite well. And why is that? So Rocket Internet is shutting down this kind of activities, also other company builders, and they realized we are not working with real founders, they are not working on their ideas, and we don't have teams that really believe in the product and are inspired by the product. And therefore, for example, Innogy also had to learn. They started with 100% owned companies, and now they are very founder-friendly because we have to work with the entrepreneurs. And now the entrepreneurs have the majority share in the company. Yeah, and this is something totally untypically when a corporation is building something and owning not the majority share when they build it. Yeah, but that's really critical to get the good people on board. Then let's shortly talk about venture capital. This is also kind of a reputational industry, right? Because you have to build your reputation, you have to have the terms that other investors and other entrepreneurs want to work with you. Yeah, if you have terms like call options, first right of refusal, you want to have a majority share in the company, no entrepreneur wants to work with you, especially not the good ones. Maybe the B, C, D grade type of entrepreneurs, but they are not going to lead you to success. Yeah, therefore, you have to go really with the market terms here. And then last but not least, the Innovation Hub. For me, the Innovation Hub is not just an activity like the others. It is really the idea of building a platform within an ecosystem that is connecting all the activities like investment, building new stuff, working together with startups, collaborating with startups, and bringing all these activities together. And this is really, really important because the core of the Innovation Hub in an ecosystem and the Innogy Innovation Hub is not only active in Berlin, it's active in Tel Aviv, it's active in Silicon Valley. It's really the core of interacting with the ecosystem. So what we can learn from these examples? So really focus on building reputation. Try to make yourself attractive to talent and stakeholders in the ecosystem because this is the source you're working with. If the people don't want to work with you, then you're really gaining nothing out of that. How you can reach that? You definitely have to be bold with your plans, yeah, and your goals, but be humble, inspirational, and founder-friendly. So what I say always when I go to an executive board, I always tell the derived quote of JFK, ask what you can do for the ecosystem before you ask what the ecosystem can do for you. And have that always in mind. This kind of mindset you need to get into an ecosystem and attract the people. Therefore, it's good to inspire, and not only by the people that are in the ecosystem. For example, the CEO of Innogy, Peter Therium, just flew in for an event last week here in Berlin and talking about innovation. the understanding of innovation from the executive board for him as a CEO, and talking and mingling with the ecosystem. This is a signaling to the people here in the ecosystem. Innogy is taking it seriously. And that really inspired the people last week. Then you have, it's better to build something, and not having a huge party at the beginning and talking what you want to do. We have a lot of these parties here in Berlin, but start talking about the things that you have already done and achieved, and show that you're able to make them work, because this is much better to build trust, and you can also connect what you have done to the startups, for example, and they can advocate for what your achievements are, and become evangelists also in your name in the ecosystem. And so really build something and be under the radar, and then be there if you have something to tell. And it took us almost 2 years to build something up, and have done more than 5 investments now here, only in seed investment in the last couple of weeks. And then you have something to tell, because you can show that you're able to deliver. Then accept market standards, as I said. So don't go for call option rights, for first right of refusal and stuff like that. You have to be on eye level with the other venture capitalists, and also with the good entrepreneur, because everyone is educated in the ecosystem and understands this kind of terms. And if you are coming as a corporation and say, okay, but I want to have a call option, and many of the corporations still want to have a call option, then they're not going to work with you. And then you shouldn't think about having just 1 or 2 activities, because, we want to try things out. In the end, you have to think in portfolios and run many, many activities. And therefore, you have also to learn that you're not pushing too much money into only one thing. Especially in the early stage, you have to work with the cost structures of startups, because otherwise it's getting too expensive, and you're not able to build so many startups or ventures by yourself, that you can build a portfolio, and the portfolio where you have 1 or 2 that's going to be successful, and the most of them will fail anyway. And last but not least, trust the entrepreneurs. If you make a decision to invest into a startup, you invest into the entrepreneurs. And maybe the most of you wouldn't have recognized this young guy, Mark Zuckerberg, in 2004, but everyone who recognized him and invested him and believed in him really made a fortune. So if you start to attract the best talent, and when the partners start to queue and want to work with you, then you're definitely on your way. And if you're able to convince them by your doing, and not by your great PR that you're doing here in the ecosystem, then you're absolutely right. So does that affect, in the end, the exploitation of your existing company? So what I see is, for example, with innogy, over the last 2 years, the existing organizations start to adapt the ways of working that we do in the Innovation Hub. And because they see it's successful, and we are able to start transforming also the ways of how the organization exploring new variants of their business, and starting to integrate that. And are we going to see then new forms of organizations? A network type of organization, or then an exponential organization? We are going to hear more about that from Salim in the next talk, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Sebastian. Questions, experiences, something to share? Who has a question? Any question? Right here in the front. Microphone, thank you. Right here in the middle.
I was just wondering whether you have any concrete example in European context of a traditional company that's actually started moving towards this sort of setup with the ecosystem, where there has been essentially tangible results of bottom line impact.
So the reason why there is no bottom line results impact, because this kind of activities only started a couple years ago. And when you start doing building seed companies, that will always take a time. But what we are looking for to show if we are having impact is looking at the valuation of the companies. And so if we can grow our valuation of the companies within the next founding rounds, that's also why it's very important to be open to other investors. And then you have a market setup where you can really figure out what the valuation of the company is. And if you are growing in the total portfolio value and valuation, then you're on your right track. And maybe we can see in the first 5 to 6 to 7 years the first exits, yeah, and then we can talking really about bottom line impact and also maybe things that the business participated in the usage of that kind of new companies. But this really takes time, and therefore you have to think in the long term and not in the short term.
Question here, right, front row.
Thanks so much for a very interesting talk. I think that really works, that innovation hub idea really works for somebody like innogy, big corporate that needs to do something. They know if they don't change, they'll be out of business at some point, right? What do you recommend to the Mittelstand, to those mid-sized German companies, say between 500 and 200 million in revenues, that can't afford an innovation hub, but
yes,
that also feel the same sort of pressure or changes around them? What should they do?
Yeah, so I have a very good example here. So one of my other clients, a company from Stuttgart, and that kind of Mittelstand company, mostly family owned, and they thought about, okay, what we can do, yeah? And they do it in the small way. So they have given their head of corporate development the go to say, okay, look for digital companies that can improve our vertical value chain, yeah? Digital companies bringing in exponential technologies, yeah? And then give them the opportunity to test very, very quickly if that's working within our business or not. And they're very, very hands-on, because this is always kind of a problem, bringing a startup to a corporation and then test some things. Yeah? And they're really figured out how to do that very quickly. And then they're also capable of investing, co-investing into the companies within the next financing rounds. And so there's a very good bondage. They're only investing a couple million of euros in the investment rounds, but they're working together, and the impact of that kind of activities is already there if it's working out. And then they can scale it into the whole organization, and this is working. So there are ways of doing it with less amount of money, yeah, and bring it directly to the organization, but there's also the case that the CEO of the company is really committed to that, and they have the right guy in the corporate development to make it happen.
Okay, thank you. Last question, there in the back.
I have two simple questions. Hello. First one is, how do you bring back the innovation from the innovation hub to innogy, to the mothership company, or to the RVE? I guess that's the goal, to bring the innovation back, not just develop something for the heck of development and playing innovation theater. This is question number one. And second thing, also, what is your ultimate strategy? Are you interested in going to market together with those companies and startups that you're developing and building? Or you're only interested in commercial part of it, in the exit strategy and just generating money out of the exit? Thanks.
So let's answer the last question quickly. So we're interested in the exits, yeah, because we have to think that way. Yeah, and on the long run, really, I think we are going to see maybe some of those companies, like, for example, a Nest investment of Google Ventures. They are going to acquire that kind of company. Maybe we are also going to see something like that. Yeah, but we have to grow it outside the existing organization and the outside business, because we are also doing disruptive stuff. Yeah, so cannibalizing the existing business, and therefore we have to hold a minority share position, because otherwise the business could always stop you. Yeah, and then we also define very dedicated landing strips inside the business, because one of our proposition, not only to our entrepreneurs, but also to other startups, that we're able to connect you with the business. First starting with a pilot, yeah, and we are bringing in some budget and not getting shares back, and the business start working really with the startup. And this is always the start of maybe an investment, but maybe you don't have to invest into the company, but you can still just work with it, yeah, and see that it's really contributing to the development of the business. And then it's also fine. Yeah, but therefore you need this kind of landing strips and commitment, for example, by the executive board for retail and things like that. And this is something we have built up in a structured way, and we have the commitment inside the business, yeah, but also from the top executives.